Welcome to the Author's Edge radio show with Guy L. Freer and Bob Price. Now, their show airs nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network, Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. Each week on their show, they help authors create books that transform our lives and imaginations. Through radio excellence, they create a unique community resource, one that promotes, connects, and fosters a sense of well-being. Gael and Bob maintain a focus on sharing books, publishing, marketing, and writing solutions. They serve listeners by providing outlets for their creative skills and energies, and they help them flourish in the competitive marketplace. Their weekly show provides intros, writing spotlights, helps you in promoting your book, your writing, your publishing, your marketing tidbits, and much more. Okay, audience, here's Gael and Bob.
Well, hello, everyone. Unfortunately, today, Bob is not with us. He's not feeling real well. He's at home taking care of a sciatic nerve, and he fell down the stairs and he sprained his ankle. And gosh, Bob is just not doing well. So I am here, and we are going to talk to Dr. Koichi Fujino, professor at
Seinan Gakuin University
in Japan.
Okay, Fukuoka, and I'm enjoying the living in the Fukuoka, but I am now in America. Yes.
Right, and he's now staying at Cape Girardeau, Missouri, as a visiting research scholar at Southeast Missouri University from March 30th through March.
Yeah.
His research interests lie in the areas of the literature of the American South, American modernism, and literary education for students who are studying English as a second language. Dr. Fujino is the author of the book published from Lexington Books in 2018 titled Studying and Teaching W.C. Faulkner, William Faulkner, and Digital Literacy, Personal Democracy, and Social Combination. He is also the editor of two books, American Modernism and Popular Fiction, Writers of Modern Life and Desire, 1920s to 1950s, Metropolis and Solidarity, Literary Views on New York, 1920s to 2010. He has also co-edited 3 textbooks on American culture for Japanese students. His main interest is in William Faulkner's work, and he is now writing his second book on William Faulkner's later novels. So welcome, Dr. Koichi Fujino. What brought you to Southeast Missouri?
Thank you very much for your
welcome. Southeast Missouri is far from Japan.
Right, actually, it takes more than 17 hours to fly from the Haneda to the St. Louis, and it takes 2 hours, who came from the St. Louis to the, that's Cape Girardeau. But I enjoy all the trips.
Yes. All the trips?
Yes.
So what brought you to Southeast Missouri?
Yeah, actually, the Southeast Missouri State University have a Faulkner Study Center, actually. So they are actually having a very huge materials of the William Faulkner, which is inherited from the one very rich person. And it contains many manuscripts, many depictions about the Faulkner, and also the drawing of himself. So by such a kind of the very bunch of the stuffs of the information, I'm touching on them, inside of the library. And I also got the office in the library in the university. So it's a very good situation for me to study the Faulkner for a year while I am taking the sabbatical.
So you're here for the whole year?
Yeah, whole year.
A sabbatical.
Yeah, right.
Oh, how wonderful that is.
Yeah, it's a very wonderful experience for me to staying in the Cape Girardeau, a very historical place. And it's also famous about Mark Twain also. And also the kind of the history of the Civil War, So in such a kind of the condition, I'm always going to the riverside of the Mississippi River, and I'm so astonishing about all the things. It's a very nice experience for me, Yeah.
Wonderful.
Right.
What inspired your interest in American South literature?
Yeah, actually, the Southern literature has some kind of similarity with the Japanese culture. And William Faulkner also commenting such a kind of the thing. about the culture's similarity. One of the reasons is maybe William Faulkner guessing that our history of such a kind of the warriors, for example, the samurai or something that will be a little similarity with Southern chivalry, a kind of the Southern heroic image
Yes.
of the gentleman and the gentle image of the Southern belle. Such a kind of the images seems to be a kind of nostalgically some similarities he feels about the
That's
Japanese
interesting.
culture. Maybe it is a kind of the just an image, but this is a very good images of us to share about each other. So because of such a kind of the similarity of the a kind of the past, and also we are having some kind of the similar some kind of the regretful experiences of the losing the war. In the South, they are losing the Civil War, and in the Japan, we are losing the World War II. In such a kind of the also the similarity of the some kind of the regretful experience for us, because of such a kind of the regretful experience, we are actually sharing some kind of the similar historical process of the recovery of such kind of the traumatic experience. It's also giving us some kind of the sympathy among them. So because of such a kind of the sharing of such a kind of experiences, many Japanese scholars also believing that they can understand the William Faulkner's works, and maybe William Faulkner also can understand our situation or our kind of the mind. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
You also like a strong sympathy for William Faulkner.
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Yeah, and that's as a result of the feeling of the losing of the war, the chivalry,
actually, it's a kind
yeah.
of because it's a kind of the similarity of the history, but also I also can understand that his image of the kind of the regional culture, and his own inheritances from the past is also giving us some kind of the same, a kind of the a kind of the same experiences or some kind of the same images of the past. Because one of the reasons is we are actually developing a kind of the history of the silk, that we are actually having a silk industry inside
Silk
of
industry.
the silk industry. And in South, they have some kind of the cotton
industry.
and we are actually prospering using these industries. When I was in the elementary school days, I actually feeling such a kind of the atmosphere of such a kind of the very wealthy silk industries influences to our area, but it suddenly stops as when I was 7 years old around, because of the importances of the much more cheaper land from the foreign countries. Such a kind
Interesting.
with such a kind of experiences are happened also in the South, a little more earlier days maybe.
Right.
So it's such a kind of
the suddenness of it.
suddenness of the stopping of the wealthiness is a kind of the shocking experience for us all. So actually, my parents and my great grandfather actually going to other works. For example, my grandfather and my parents are teaching in the schools instead of going to the silk industry or any other industries, and maybe you can find such a kind of the pattern of the shifting of the jobs of the people in the South. They are actually one of the very typical shifting is maybe some of the persons who is a great grandfather or grandfather is working at the coal mine, and they are actually their children are going to the teaching job, and the next one is the IT job, for example. Such a kind of the shiftings of the job is a kind of a very typical pattern of the people. But in such a kind of the shift of the people, actually they are actually experiencing some kind of the very shocking change of their mind. You
Mhm.
know, in the ancient days, or his great or great grandfather's days, they are sticking to one place and they are keeping some kind of the solidarity. Of course, they have some problems inside of the society, but also they are loving their own hometown,
Right.
right? But 3 or 4 generations after, the peoples are shifting around.
Right. They're
You
moving
know,
around
you keep
because they have to look for
around.
jobs. They have to
Yeah,
look for a home.
they are merging.
Yeah.
Many people are merging, and in a way, for example, we are actually confronting the very different kinds of the people and marriages.
Right.
In the descendants.
Right.
So in such a kind of the shifting, we have to changing our recognition of our value. For example, about the race, for example, about the genders, for example, about the wealthiness, what is the wealthiness and what is the solidarity it is.
Right.
So in such a kind of the shifting is very important thing for us all, but especially for the South, especially for the Japan, that changes are so huge in these 2 or 3 generations. That's a very interesting things to share such a kind of the shocking experiences with the other foreign authors also.
Right.
Yeah.
But Japan only has one race.
Yeah, actually, yes. But actually, if you are going to, for example, Okinawa,
Mm-hmm.
or Yokosuka or Yokohama, in these local places, you have actually an U.S. Army, actually, because of the historical background of the World War
Okay.
II, and especially when it comes to for example, the Vietnam War, Okinawa is actually belonging to the U.S.
Okay.
It is not belong to Japan, and
Okay.
many women married with the U.S. Army's men, and
Right.
they are going to, for example, America, and they are having the descendants in America becoming a civil person
Okay.
in Japan. So in such a kind of processes, they are actually realizing some kind of the huge changes or some kind of the racial, some kind of the problem in a very different way in Japan
Okay.
also.
Different in a different
So,
way, but
but there is also some
division.
kind of the individual problems happens, and one of the very interesting episode I recently hear is that some of the Japanese citizens in America are captured
Uh-huh.
and actually jailed sometimes or
Right.
segregated in the
Right.
California
Mm-hmm.
area as a kind of the prisoner.
Right.
So in such a kind of the experiences, some of the person who lived there do not teach Japanese language to their children.
Right.
So they are losing their own languages and they are learning English only. It is a kind of the huge differences or some kind of the sad inheritances of the past. But such a kind of the things may also in a very different way happens in for example, the South. Some maybe the African American marry with a white man as a white woman as a kind of the normal civil person,
Uh-huh.
and at the same time they are losing some kinds of the inheritances from the ancestors, or they have to create some kind of the new value among them. It's a kind of a very exciting experiences maybe, but at the same time it is a kind of a very traumatic shocking,
Mm-hmm.
for their own mind.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they actually cannot speak about that, because when you are losing your own mother tongue, for example the Japanese language, sometimes you cannot express it in your own language.
Mm-hmm.
You learned English, but the English sometimes is not enough to express your own feelings about your local experiences
Mm-hmm.
in a logical way. So that's a kind of the same things happens for the southern people. William Faulkner guessing, I think. William Faulkner is looking around and it is a kind of the very sometimes poor southerners, in the American South, and they are actually trying to express their own condition, but their languages are not so enough, like you read in the writing August of the William Faulkner,
It's interesting that you should say that because in my own background,
right? Yeah.
okay,
Right.
I was born in France.
Yeah.
Okay. My
Oh.
father was an American soldier.
Wow.
My mother was a French girl.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And my mother, when they decided to come to the States,
Mhm.
my mother stopped speaking French to me
Oh. Why?
because it would have meant she was afraid I was going to get bullied in school,
Mm-hmm.
and because I was left back in kindergarten
Mm-hmm.
because I couldn't speak English.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so she stopped speaking French to me.
Wow.
And so what happened was that I was left back in kindergarten,
Mhm.
but my sister only spoke English.
Wow.
Okay. And so my sister spent a lot of time when we were growing up in the beginning, not, later, but in the early years, she spent a lot of time translating for people because my English was kind of broken. It was like broken French, broken
Yeah.
English.
Yeah.
And she spent time translating to people because I wasn't communicating effectively.
Wow.
Okay.
Yes.
And my mother was displaced because but all of the things that you're talking about
Mhm.
are some of the things that my mother experienced.
Right. Yes.
And so she stopped speaking English or stopped speaking French to us as children.
Right.
And now, something that she regrets
Mhm.
today
Right.
because it would have meant that we would have been bilingual,
Mm.
and that's something, hindsight
Yes.
is 2020, where
Yes.
you would think that, now it would be a good thing
Yeah. Right.
to have
To
that
have the
bilingualism,
language,
and
yes.
for those your Japanese children to have that language now is a good thing to have because you would be bilingual.
Yes.
And being bilingual in today's society is an advantageous thing.
Right.
All right. But even when my mother was growing up, she came from a province in the western part of France
Mhm.
that spoke Breton, which is a Gaelic
Yes.
language.
Yes.
And so when they moved closer to Paris,
Mhm.
they were not accepted. And because she was
Right.
considered a second-class citizen.
Yes.
And so they needed to learn French.
Mhm.
All right. And that made it very difficult. And so my mother made a point of making sure that her children didn't have to deal with that.
Right.
And so, the whole concept of language, as you were mentioning,
Yes.
with the Japanese and with not having that connection
Yes.
and being able to communicate that connection is a profound thing all through.
Yeah, that's true.
It's
It's a kind of behind even the language, you can feel some kind of historical power balances between the
Yes, you
countries,
can.
and also some kind of the traumatic experiences of the history.
Mhm.
So in such a kind of the relationship with some kind of the bad memories or some kind of the segregation experiences, the language sometimes be oppressed to learn about that.
Yeah.
Now, from today's point of view, it might be a much more happier things for us to having some trilingual or bilingual, such a kind of situation might be happier for us, but it's such a kind of the situation have not been rare, have not been experienced so much in the past. So no. So it's a kind of the very interesting thing. And sometimes if you are choosing one language, it means that you have to leave away the other languages. That's a very sad thing.
It is a sad thing. Yes. It really is. It really is, because having more than one language makes you more open.
Yes.
It opens your horizons. It doesn't close your horizons.
And I also thinking that if you are living in the deep south like William Faulkner, maybe William Faulkner also experiences such a kind of the linguistic situation, not in such a kind of the international situation, but also among some small communities, race problem. As a race problem, the African Americans talking with each other, but their languages are very different from the white people's decent one. Or maybe if you go to the New Orleans, maybe you can experience such a kind of Creole or some kind of the French culture. Such a kind of the very minor culture are actually not experienced so much in America. In such a kind of the not the international, but such a kind of the multicultural communication or in the South, because of such a kind of the experiences, Faulkner is actually accepting many aspects of the various cultures and try to create a little much more colorful world in his own novel, I believe. So
Yes.
I enjoy it. Yes.
So, I mean, how do you engage your students with Faulkner's works now? I just finished reading Light in August,
Yeah.
and there are parts of that book that I kind of want to strangle Faulkner over
Yes, that's right.
because he gets very wordy,
Mhm.
you know,
Right.
and he just goes on and on. And I'm an English teacher.
Yeah,
Okay.
you know.
I taught English for 39 years. I
Yes.
love English. It is my passion. But there comes a point in time when I would like Faulkner to get to the point already.
That's true.
Okay?
Yeah.
Just get to the point.
Yes.
All right.
That's a problem for me. It's a kind of, I am actually loving the William Faulkner's works, but sometimes I feel some hesitation about teaching William Faulkner's works itself to the students because
Right.
it is, like you say, it's so wordy, so difficult to catch what is the core of that.
Why
So
is
why
it
he is
okay?
doing
Now, the
that?
second to
Yes.
last chapter
Yeah, right.
in Light in August, when he goes on and on about Hightower, I'm like, just tell me what you need to tell me
Right.
about Hightower, and let's
Right.
get done with this. Okay?
But he
All
is actually talking, and he is not ending all of the things. And when you are finishing the reading of his own talk, we cannot catch anything about that. But that's the problem, and that's also that's the point of the William Faulkner. He is
It is.
always hearing the other Southern people's voices, but their voices are not so much clear. It's a vague
Yes.
sometimes. And like a person who is sitting on the street and he is talking something to the people, and he's talking not so making so much meaning about that. But in such a kind of the situation, you can feel the South itself.
Mhm.
That's the point Faulkner is trying to tell sometimes. And also in the sometimes behind of that such a kind of the situation, maybe you can find some kind of the sharing images of the South. But I cannot understand what it is when I was studying the Faulkner. So I'm sometimes for a very long time, I'm just wondering what kind of the images I have to catch behind William Faulkner's works. What kind of the historical background it is. But when I was learning at in Indiana University of Pennsylvania to get my PhD,
Mhm.
I find out his great-grandfather's works. And
Right.
his great-grandfather's works is a 19th century's a little popular works among the
Yes.
local people.
Yes,
You know that?
I took a look at that.
You look at that?
Yes.
And
There was one about he had a murder mystery on the
Murder
Mississippi.
mystery of the Mississippi it's called a kind of the White Rose of Memphis.
Right.
So and, I told to me that why don't you read it? Maybe it might be some hint for that. So I began to read 2 or 3 of his books, his great grandfather's works,
Mhm.
and I astonishingly finding out that these are very bad novels. Second-rated,
Second-rate.
completely second-rated. It's a kind of the very typical patterns of the romance,
Uh-huh.
a kind of the very heroic white gentleman
Uh-huh.
and the Southern Belle and they are
Oh.
fragile
Oh.
and the heroic hero is saving the heroine finally and they are happy ever after. Okay, that's right. But when I read it, I astonishing realizing that I can completely understand it.
Uh-huh.
I get all the images.
Right.
It's much more clear. This is the origin of the Gone with the Wind.
Yes.
You can understand that. Oh, this is a history. Actually, it's not the real history of the South, but this is imagined history of the Southern people.
Right.
I recognize that. So after I read this great grandfather's work, I returned back to William Faulkner's work and try to begin with the Sound and the Fury, some kind of the very difficult the William Faulkner's modernist novel.
Right.
Modernist novel. But I find that a little more clearly understand about that. I can understand the images behind it.
Okay.
The modernist people or the modern people in the William Faulkner trying to reject such a kind of the nostalgic image, but they are finally very attracted to return to that. This kind of the double mind is a very important point of the Southern people. I understand. So I now, or at that time, I feel that, oh, now I am understand what uh, kind of the mindset they are having
Mhm.
behind of their kind of their novel or behind of their talking. So after I understand such a kind of the historical process, I sometimes try to make my students, Japanese students, to read some short part of his great grandfather's work first,
Right.
and after that compare it with William Faulkner's short stories. And they, astonishingly, some of my students understand completely what kind of the relationship it is.
Okay.
Okay, so that's a very good experience for me, and maybe I understand that this is my point. This is my position to argue about his great grandfather's works and William Faulkner's works. So I started to write a dissertation, my PhD thesis with that theme, actually.
All right. I have to do a radio show identifier.
Yep.
You are listening to The Author's Edge with Gael Freer and Bob Price, coming to you weekly on Saturdays at 10 a.m. on KWRH 92.9 and KXOK 102.9 FM, and Monday to Friday, 2 p.m. and 7 p.m. nationwide on the My Genre Radio Network. You can also view our latest videos of past shows at authors-edge.com online and download valuable information on marketing and publishing. So, in a couple of minutes, we're going to go to a commercial break,
Mhm.
right?
Right. Yeah.
And so let's go to that commercial break now. Is that okay with you, Mark? We're going to go to a commercial break, and then we will be back with my friend here, Kiyoshi, Dr.
Koichi Fujino.
Koichi Fujino.
Thank you.
There we go.
The United States has a strong tradition of welcoming newcomers and refugees. The Welcome Corps is a new service opportunity for Americans inspired to welcome those seeking freedom and safety, and in turn help strengthen their own communities. Welcome Corps is a public-private partnership that is inspired by what Americans represent to so many around the world, a beacon of hope and refuge. All it takes is a helping hand. Are you ready to learn more? Contact the International Institute of St. Louis at info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090. That's info@iistl.org or call 314-773-9090.
El Potro Restaurant and Market, located at 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland, offers the finest variety of Mexican and Central American groceries and goods. El Potro Restaurant serves authentic Mexican and Central American cuisine, including daily specials, not to mention the best horchata and tastiest margaritas in St. Louis. Open 7 days a week. El Potro, 6920 Manchester Avenue, 1 block east of McCausland.
In 1857, the Dred Scott decision was a major legal event and catalyst that contributed to the Civil War. The decision declared that Dred Scott could not be free because he was not a citizen. The 14th Amendment, also called the Dred Scott Amendment, granted citizenship to all born or naturalized here in our country and was intended to overturn the U.S. Supreme Court decision on July 9, 1868. The Dred Scott Heritage Foundation is requesting a commemorative stamp to be issued from the U.S. Postal Service to recognize and remember the heritage of this amendment by issuing a stamp with the likeness of the man Dred Scott. But we need your support and the support of thousands of people who would like to see this happen. To achieve this goal, we ask you to download, sign, and share the one-page petition with others. To find the petition, please go to dredscottlives.org and click on the Dred Scott Petition Drive on the right side of the page.
Communication with each other is a very important.
Okay, and we are back, and we are talking to Dr. Koichi Fujino.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, my driver back there. Okay, you've given me a quote, and I really, actually, your quote drove me to take a look at your book. I had gone to Amazon and I pulled up your book
Oh, thank
on
you.
Amazon,
Mhm.
and I took a look at the very beginning of your
Mhm.
book, because the quote that you have, I was kind of confused because when I looked at your book,
Yeah.
okay, and it says studying and teaching W.C. Faulkner, William Faulkner, and digital literacy, and then I looked at the quote and I was just like, what's the connection?
Yes.
Let me read the quote. I am not an American citizen. I thought to myself, I cannot have the American flag, American democracy, and the American nation as mine. I am just a foreigner. I am one of the others in this nation. And this is from your book, Studying and Teaching W.C. Faulkner, William Faulkner, and Digital Literacy, Personal Democracy and Social Combination. Tell me the importance of this
Okay. So
quote.
this is actually a declaration of my position.
Mhm.
I have to read and teach all things as an outsider of the American literature and American culture
Mhm.
because I am not the American citizen. And maybe some of the Japanese scholars can believing that they are sharing the same spirit with the American democracy or American
Mhm.
nation, but I cannot share such a kind of the similarity or identity with the American democracy or American nation, because if you look at the other countries' democracy, for example, the Mexico's democracy or Taiwan's democracy, Japan's democracy or Korean democracy, they are all different from the American democracy for even if it is a little differences. So it is meaning that our democracy is very different for each person.
Mhm.
And also, sometimes American democracy is not so effective to manage our countries or the other international problems.
Mhm.
If you are, for example, of the 2001's 9/11 attack, if such a kind of the attacking happens, American democracy is not so effective to manage all things.
Mhm.
Sometimes, and if we I actually experienced 9/11 attacks when I was in the San Francisco, near to the San Francisco.
Right. I'd read
And
that.
you read that, and
Mhm.
I strongly feeling that I am a kind of just a foreigner. If I was killed at for example, the twin building,
Mhm.
maybe the American government just zipping up my body and send it back to Japan. I will not be recognized as a citizen of the America. So in such a kind of the situation, what is my identity? I asked myself,
Mhm.
and when I was at that time teaching, even if I am teaching the American literature in
Mhm.
Japan or even in America, it is not it is not actually working so well to recognize myself as a kind of the person who is belonging to the American culture or American nation. So in any case, I am a kind of the foreigner. I have to look at the American democracy and American nation or American literature from the outside point of view. From the outside,
Mhm.
I am an outsider. And at the same time, I have to create my own democracy myself, my own spirit myself, to be a uh, much more, uh, a kind of the much more strong or much more persuasive to the other persons or even to the American people. So I have to start with such a kind of the, thinking about my own democracy itself again from at that time. That is my start point of my writing. And I also have to create some kind of the, I called it later a personal democracy.
A
I
what?
have to personal democracy
Okay.
by the social combination. So I began to thinking about that, and I began to to build up my own idea about that. So that's my start point of my book.
What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, actually, this book is inspired my discovery of my own position. I actually finding out that maybe I have to create my own equal relationship with others just for a very short time. You know, well, like
Yeah, you
I
talk
and
about
you.
social combination.
Social
and
combination.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I finding out this kind of the idea of the social combination at that time, and I finding out this is my idea and this is mine, but that combination is coming out of my own a kind of the negative idea about our relationship. Our democratic relationship. We are sometimes believing in that. We can keep our own democratic relationship with each other for eternal way, but it's not true. We are just having our own democratic relationship or equal relationship very for a short time. I would
Mhm.
like to give you one example. Maybe you know the Huckleberry Finn.
Mhm.
The adventures of the Huckleberry Finn,
Mhm.
and the Jim and Huck is a very representative relationship of the democratic relationship between the white boy and the African American boy. But if you are actually reading the adventures of the Huckleberry Finn, their relationship is a very short time relationship. They
Right.
are riding on the raft, and
Mhm.
they are actually talking with each other. But their equal relationship is a very short time, and because but it is a very short term democratic relationship, but that experiences gives a very huge influence to the Huck's mind. So Huck changes, and Huck try to solve, Huck try to save the Jim at the end of the novel, because of such a kind of short-term relationship. When I find out such a kind of the social combination or some kind of the short terms of the democratic relationship is very powerful, I find out maybe this is the first stage or the start point of our relationship to
Mhm.
create our own new democracy. I am actually imagining my own international class. My international class, many students are gathering together from America, from China, and from Taiwan, and from France, and so forth. And in a very short time, they have to have some kind of the uh, democratic or equal relationship with each other in the class.
Mhm.
And after that, maybe they are returning to back to their own countries, their
Mhm.
own societies, their own original ideas. Maybe in such a cases, they will feeling some kind of the differences of their own cultures or differences of their own, the societies. But in class, it's even if it is a very short term, they experiences the small democratic equal relationship, and such a kind of experiences give a huge influence to their mind, I believe. So I conducted my classes several times using my kind of such a kind of technique of the social combination. They are ordering my students to, create some combination with each other, 2 or 3 persons group, and talking with each other, and having sometimes giving their opinions to public, all
Mhm.
of those people. And in such a kind of the deeds, I find out that at the end of the class, some students are saying that we have never experienced such a kind of the atmosphere in Japan. It's so astonishing for me. They are actually feeling some kind of the uh, community,
Mhm.
feeling of the community or some kind of the solidarity among the students because of such a kind of very short-term conversation with each other. And they are changing every time they are changing their groups. So they are almost all they are talking with each other very, very short time in for 2 or 3 months, you know. But it is a kind of the very short-term experiences for them. But they are feeling that this class seems to be a kind of the family, seems to like a kind of a little more warm, a little more relaxing, we can talk with each other, we know with each other. So that's a very good experiences for us. Some of the students told me. So it's a kind of the very curious experiences for me. I haven't thought that such a kind of the small activities are so effective to the students, but it is a very
Effective.
very effective actually.
Now, this is a method that, all right, have you heard of the Socratic method?
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
How is that different from the Socratic method?
Oh, Socrates method and me method is a little different because Socrates is actually living in a very segregated society in a way. The woman and man are segregated in the old Greek society,
Okay.
and they also have slaves. And in such a kind of aristocratic classes,
Okay.
they are exchanging their words. And also, Socrates itself is a kind of much more. I sometimes thought such a kind of a method Socrates, but the attitude is much more demolishing of the demolishing ones or more radical ones. They are actually he is actually trying to create or undermine the other person's standpoint,
Okay.
and demolishing the idea itself and try
Okay.
to create something. But it's not my point. My point is, first is to
Create a
understand,
relationship.
create relationship with each other. Try to find out on what stages we can be equal with. This
Okay.
is a very, very difficult
Mm-hmm.
because Socrates is actually living in a kind of the monolithic culture. It's a kind of the unified culture. They are sharing the same value, same language with each other, with some kind of the aristocratic classes. They are civilian. But in my international class, they are coming together from various international, from nations, and their positions are so different. Their religions are so different, and they actually do not share any values about them sometimes.
Right.
So in such a cases, instead, Socrates' case, demolishing value is effective to reconstruct the society. But in my case, we have to create the society from the start point, as a start point. That's a very different. And in my case, I sometimes telling the students that finding out the same stage is sometimes very difficult. Trying to find out some table, trying to find out some stages. Very short, even if it is a very short time, it is a very creative job for us in today's world. As you said, we are now considering that 2 or 3 languages is a very good to read and write and speak. But it means that it's a kind of the fragmentation of the values of our own mind. We sometimes do not have any confidences about the value.
Right.
We are losing some kind of the aura of the high art. We are not sharing the same some kind of the taste about the art or culture or something. In such a case, maybe the creation of the equalness is the very creative activity for us all. So I think that this is a very important job for today's students or even for us.
So in this book, you also bring up the digital literacy.
Yeah.
So how do you incorporate that?
Yeah, actually, the digital literacy have a very 2 different directions that is giving us, because the digital literacy is actually very democratically giving us the information. They are opening up many information to us all, and we are actually having many opinions, and sometimes the people are actually gathering or publishing their opinions on the Yahoo or
Right.
other
And
things.
sometimes it's not,
Sometimes it's not so good, but they
Yeah.
are actually saying all the opinions about that. It's okay. But at the same time, the digital literacy or digital information is actually giving us a very huge pressure about some big data information or
Mhm.
some kind of the instructive information to us as if it is a kind of the truth, it is sometimes very curious that in Japan, we are saying that Google is sometimes Google Sensei. Google Sensei means Google teacher.
Right.
We are consulting Google to get some truth or some
Right.
instruction from the Google. But it's actually just a gathering of the people's knowledge,
Mhm.
But we are actually feeling that some kind of the truth is coming from the Google or some internet digital informations. So the two directions are now struggling in the digital literacy. On the one hand, it is giving us a very democratic way, open up the information resources, many resources we are reading. But because we are actually having very various opinions about that, too much various, we are sometimes relying on the Google or some kind of the big data information to decide our own truth.
Right.
That's a very dangerous tendency of
Absolutely.
us all. So in my digital literacy, I actually trying to create some kind of the very small levels of the common knowledges in among us, I actually create some kind of the discussion board among the students and trying to make them to create some kind of the common opinion or some kind of the
Common
creative
knowledge.
knowledges, yes, common knowledges among them on the whiteboard or kind of the digital board,
Mhm.
and try to create some kind of the common knowledges or common understanding
Yes.
or common understanding about the things on the digital literacy. It's a small vision, but it's a kind of in such a kind of the process. I hope that it's a kind of the uh, process of the creativity
Mhm.
in the digital literacy, and I try to do it. And at the same time, maybe my students will understand. Maybe they can get various information from the digital literacy, from the the digital information resources,
Mhm.
but also at the same time they can create their own common knowledge by themselves. They can feel that they are the origin of the information. They
Right.
can create their own information by
And
themselves.
reliable sources
Yes,
for that
for that
information.
information.
Well, how
That's
do
the
you
point.
monitor the AI concept? How do you monitor
Yeah,
that?
that is a very important problem about that. But
Yes.
today, I think that I sometimes
Well,
contacting to the AI or some kind of the big data, and I feel that this big data have never given us the truth or what really we want to answer about that
Mhm.
issues. AI is always answering us a kind of the gathering of the knowledges,
Mhm.
and such a kind of the monotonous knowledge or kind of the monotonous answer is not so good for us to develop our own mind.
Right.
So I sometimes feeling that the AI is, in essence, the AI is a kind of the gathering of the people's deeds. People's AI's resources are kind of the big data. The big data means that what people are doing now.
Right.
So if we are changing our own doing, then the AI will reflect our own mind. So in any case, sometimes we can use the AI for our own tool, but
Yeah, it can be
always
used.
can be used. But also, always we do not give up. We cannot give up our own mind, our own creative mind among uh, individuals. In our personal relationship, we should develop much more our personal relationship or personal democratic discussions among ourselves on the digital space. And then such a kind of the digital based discussion will develop into much more different mode of the AI, different mode of our gathering of the knowledge of us. much more free, much more a kind of multiple standpoints or some kind of viewpoints we can get.
What digital platforms do you use when you teach Faulkner?
Actually, using the Google Class, I am using.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I find out that Google is very flexible and it is a very good to use that. Yes.
Yeah.
And in such a kind of activity on the Google Class, I find out that students are very flexibly reactions to my own course materials, and it's a very good for me. Yes.
What drives your passion for literary education?
In my case, the literary education is.
Yeah, what got you started on this?
In my case,
Mhm.
I don't know. Actually, I am reading books, and but I'm a actually slow reader, and I'm so fascinated with William Faulkner. So I mainly reading William Faulkner and his great grandfather's work only. But in any case, when
Well,
I
all
was
right, all
yes, when I was
Why did
doing-
you become a teacher?
yeah, I actually became a teacher because my parents are teachers and my grandfather are teachers. So it's my main motivation that I can be a teacher, maybe. So I became a teacher. But at the same time, I want to be a teacher because, maybe I can change the way to teach.
Okay.
I have already know the old style, my parents' style, my great grandfather's style, but they are not the so democratic one. Always I feel. So
And
I
times are
want-
different.
in terms of the difference and because of the age of the change, age of the changes maybe, and because of my after the World War II, the Japanese education system become much more democratized, but I don't think it is not so well developed one. So it's not so systematized, and there is no a kind of the a rules or some kind of the principles are established. So I would like to establish my own rules, my own style, and
Mhm.
in any way I want to I want to I want to educate myself, and also I want to establish my own life as a teacher in a way. So I actually working with my job, and also I'm always searching for some kind of the principles in my teaching. And I finally finding out maybe the social democracy and personal social combination and personal democracy is my principle and maybe effective way to teach the students.
Why American literature?
Yeah, I think that the American literature and American culture is very, very important to know the Japanese literature or culture after the World War II. You know, yeah, from my point of view, the American democracy or American policy give out strong influences to the Japanese culture after the World War II.
Mhm.
And sometimes the Japanese people are resisting against such a kind of influences, but also at the same time, they are actually accepting the American democracy or American policy by their own. So in such a way, they are actually do not so much idea about the American literature or American culture and American politics, and they are just following some kind of the principles of these things without knowing anything about that. I feel that. So it's my challenge actually. I will try to read the American literature and especially the William Faulkner and try to finding out what kind of the originality we can find, when I was reading the American literature. It is a kind of the resistances against our, the former generations. I feel that the former generations are actually following the American policy and American ways of the teachings and American democracy without any criticism or without any critical spirits. But I would like to try to create some kind of much more original way, again, to criticize the American literature and American culture by myself. So,
What other writers have you read besides Faulkner?
besides Faulkner, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, and some minor 19th century women literature,
Who?
E.D.E.N. Southworth. It's a kind of the
Mhm.
very famous 19th century
How
women
about Willa
literature.
Cather? Have you ever read Willa Cather?
Willa Cather, I know that, but it's not. I haven't read that. But
Read Willa Cather. She writes about the Midwest.
all right, yes, I know
Okay?
that.
She's one of my favorites.
Wow, I would like
Okay,
to try
I have
to
read
read it.
everything that she's written. I used to teach Willa Cather,
Yeah,
and I adore her.
yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
so Willa
Willa
Cather,
Cather, I read. Willa Cather,
Cather.
Yes, yes,
Okay,
yes. I will read it.
yeah,
I will read it.
yeah. Read
Yes.
read Willa Cather.
Yes,
She's good.
yeah.
She writes about Nebraska.
Yes, okay. And I also read some African American women's works, and I love that so much. Yes, and in such a way, I actually reading the minor literature is also good to read.
Yes.
Yes.
How about what's your legacy? What do you hope to leave in literature? And your legacy in literature?
My legacy is I am now leaving some kind of the principles of the teaching and the reading about the American literature. I have already wrote one book, and I'm now trying to write my second book in such a kind
Okay,
of.
and what's the name of the second book? Do you have it yet?
My second book might be the Amorphous Agency of the William Faulkner's later works. That
Okay.
might be my own second book's one. But I'd like to try to give some kind of the legacy of the spirit of the connection among the people, and I'm by using the amorphous agency, I'm actually expressing some kind of the spirit of the connections of everything. So in such a kind of the connection is now the very creative activity for us all now. So I hope that it might be a democratic connection. But
Mhm.
anyway, in the process of the connecting of various things, I'm hoping that some kind of the much more strong, resistible spirit will coming up among us against much more imperial power, for example.
If our audience wanted to contact you and purchase your book, how would they do that?
Actually, it is it's
Your
coming
book is on Amazon.
on Amazon. Yes, on Amazon and the Lexington Books, and
Okay.
yes,
All
this
right.
is
And the
coming.
title of the book is again
Uh,
Studying and Teaching W.C. Faulkner, William Faulkner, and Digital Literacy. And it's Dr. Kyocho Fujino.
Koichi Fujino.
Koichi Fujino.
Thank you very much.
I keep working on it. Thank you for tuning in to Author's Edge. Tune in again next week for more tips, resources, and your favorite conversations. Our next guest will be Riley, and she will be chatting with us about her book on breastfeeding babies. Okay, it's been nice chatting. Till then, see you around the inkwell.